Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Lowdown on Low Code. I'm your host, Ryan Duguid, here today with my co-host, Rob Koplowitz, and we've got a fantastic session lined up. Excited to announce that we have today with us Sriram Devanathan, the General Manager of AWS App Studio and Amazon Q Apps. For those of you who've been tracking, Amazon has got a rich history in this space and has recently announced a brand new platform that's really trying to shake things up a little bit right at the forefront of generative AI and LLMs. And so, Sriram, great to have you on the show with us today, and looking forward to diving in. But maybe just to get started, if you can give us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this world of low-code application development.
Yeah, thank you both for having me on. As you said, I'm the GM for AWS App Studio and for Q Apps. Background, I've been kind of in this industry 20 plus years, most of it in Amazon. Last 3 years in AWS, and I've done a variety of things here. Did something in the retail systems, ordering systems, worked on Kindle, and then looking around for something new to do. And this new space that AWS was looking to get new services into was something exciting. So that's how I wound up here. And we have two great new services that launched earlier this year. Q Apps went GA. And App Studio, obviously, is the one that went preview, both in the July time.
Fantastic. And so, in terms of your background, obviously 20 years, it feels like a bit of a company lifer in that regard. How would you sort of compare and contrast some of the other things you've worked on? It's an impressive resume at Amazon with the App Studio and low-code journey.
I think, they're all different. I think App Studio and Q Apps have been super interesting simply there because they're both 0 to 1, really figuring out a new space with Gen AI in the mix. So it was like, any assumptions that we had before we started, because we started kind of just before Gen AI, and we're actually playing with early Gen AI models within AWS. But then the world changed, and so just trying to navigate that world where the technology is changing, user expectations are changing, what we can do for them suddenly changed. So just that has been an incredible ride. I mean, I've early days working in Amazon when it's a smaller company were also crazy, but this has been by far, I think, the most interesting journey I've had.
Cool. So, Sriram, I'm Rob Koplowitz. I'm the co-host here today. And kind of, now that you mentioned Kindle, I kind of just want to ask you about the Kindle. So it was like the time I got to spend time with a Disneyland engineer who had invented the FastPass system. It's like, oh, something I'm really super passionate about. But we'll move on from the Kindle. But it's a pretty different thing to be developing applications for low-code developers, right? To be developing platforms and B, for this kind of special, not necessarily that well understood audience. Has there anything that's been unique or really surprised you about this particular journey?
Yeah, I think, the connective thread for me personally has been in all of those journeys. I've been enabling, bringing technology to kind of a new problem, enabling, in the case of, the original Amazon, it was enabling sellers, third-party sellers. In the case of Kindle, I was enabling marketing folks to build a better personalization system. So you're always enabling somebody. But I think in the case of low code, it's not a point problem that you're solving. You are enabling everybody to solve their own problem. So it is just this another class of a bigger meta problem, if you will. So that's been exciting. And then I think just to get a low code solution, kind of onboarded at any enterprise, usually there's like the thing that's kind of been, in retrospect, it shouldn't be surprising, but really you have the decision maker who's kind of paying for the tool. You have this early person who's sort of vetting the tool, and they're poking under the hood. They're usually more technical than the actual end user, who's yet another third person. And then you have IT in the mix. And so really I just listed out 4, and really we might find more, right? You've got these different stakeholders who all deeply care about how the technology is, how it works. Each of them has very different expectations. They're, the detail that the IT admin wants is very different from what the end user wants, right? And then the person who's doing the vetting may want something else entirely. So just having to cater to all of that, having the UX that kind of works differently in different situations, I think that there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and you kind of have to, again, like I said, doing that in a Gen AI world where everything is changing is, I think, been the really interesting thing.
Yeah, Ryan.
I think it's always fascinating, like from a product perspective, when you have the buyer with a set of requirements and the user with a set of needs, right?
Yeah.
And they're not always the same thing. And sometimes it can lead to awkward trade-offs, because sometimes like, I'm building something that might not necessarily get widely used, but it's something that's required to get this deal across the line. It's an interesting space.
How do you enable somebody to see the detail, the complexity? How do you enable still the end user who wants to do the simple thing? How do you make that still simple enough, right? And there's a balance. We're learning all the time. It's going to shift, I think, also. So we'll see where we go.
So in terms of App Studio, obviously Amazon's first foray into the world of low and no code was Honeycode. It's a platform that's been discontinued now in favor of App Studio. Can you tell us from the experiences with customers, with users of Honeycode, what sort of insights did the team working on App Studio derive from that helped maybe influence this, or was it really kind of a blank slate? Hey, the world's changing. We're going to approach this problem from that generative perspective, and so let's reimagine everything.
Yeah. I would say it's substantially a blank slate. I mean, if you look at Honeycode, the user interface very different. You look at the persona that they were trying to target, right? Like App Studio is very much, we're unabashed about what we call the technical professional, which means that you're not necessarily a developer, but you understand technology. You may be a data engineer. You may be a solution architect. You know how your database is laid out. You know what relationships mean if you're a data engineer. If you're a solution architect, you know what Lambda is. You know a bunch of things, right? And that's very different from kind of the Honeycode thing. So it is very much a blank slate. And then I think Gen AI just added this other layer of difference, because it also meant that you could radically simplify the user experience. And this is true regardless of the persona, right? So I think, our focus with App Studio was to really look at technical professionals, and can we enable this new class of users who previously understood what they needed, but maybe didn't have all the skills required to build them? Could we significantly reduce the learning curve there? Because that's the one big thing we heard. Existing platforms required you to kind of learn enough about the tool to become productive, and could, Gen AI just take a chunk of that away? And so that's kind of why we've invested quite a bit in the kind of the initial onboarding flow when you're kind of building out your app at the early stages.
Great. So let's build on that for a sec, Sriram, because I think in the App Studio launch announcement, there was a pretty heavy emphasis on tell me the application I want to build using natural language processing and LLMs to actually provision some framework of an application. Can you give us a sense of how you're using generative AI to power this experience, and maybe continue on this topic you started here about how that's helping to change the building of low code applications?
Yeah, like I talked about the learning curve, and there's this, you have to learn the tool, and then the other thing you have to learn, which sometimes comes through experience, is I've got this big problem that I've described, but how do I structure it? Do I structure it as 5 screens? Do I structure it as 1 screen? Do I structure it as 5 database tables or 1? Like, there's a million decisions you actually have to make, right? And so one of the things we found was that, people can learn. That's still a problem we want to help address. They can learn the interface, but they can't necessarily learn the best practices all at once, right? And so how could we mimic what the best engineer would do? How could we mimic what the best program manager or product manager would do? So that's why you see the initial experience the initial onboarding flow, it really starts with describe your problem. Then it goes and turns that into a set of requirements. Then it turns that into a set of features that it's going to build. And then you actually go build out the features. And so we did it almost like a human or a team of humans would do, right? And we've got different LLM skills or agents, if you will, kind of doing those individual steps, right? So we kind of, mimic, in some extent, we learned from what humans did and say, this is how they would do it. This is a reasonable way to teach LLMs also how to do it.
That's great. So let me just do a quick follow up on that. So, I mean, obviously Amazon has a very deep catalog of AI services, very deep investments in this area, and we've seen a lot, in the market around provisioning of applications, similar to how Amazon is doing it. Where else are you applying AI, generative or not, in helping to builders create and manage these applications and create, potentially more sophisticated and effective applications? Where else are you leveraging these new emerging capabilities?
Yeah, so just talking about AWS broadly, right? Like we're doing, just stepping away from App Studio. You've obviously heard of Q Developer, you've heard of Q Apps, my other product, and each of those is, targeting a slightly different segment. So your Q developers for the professional developers. But again, even there, we're helping you do the variety of things. We're helping you code. We're helping you migrate your legacy code. There's a capability now to migrate from an old version of Java to a more modern version of Java. There's a capability, again, built off of agentic Gen AI technology that allows you to describe, you get a bug report. You can automatically take the bug report, look at your code base, suggest a set of changes. If you approve those changes, do it. So that's one set of very interesting capabilities for developers. We have App Studio, obviously, for technical professionals who aren't developers. And then we have Q Apps, which is for business users who really don't care about how the technology works underneath, but can they use Gen AI to just solve a class of problems that they couldn't solve before? So, for example, we have the ones that everyone knows about, generating marketing blog posts and all of that. But we found very creative ways that people are using it. Somebody was using it to troubleshoot their equipment in a data center, because you have all of these giant pieces of equipment, each maybe with different manuals and all of that. And put in your error codes, and voila, you get a recommendation from these hundreds of pages of manuals saying, hey, this might be the problem. This is a historical ticket for this. Yeah? That's the kind of thing that would have taken somebody hours potentially. And now you can do that in minutes, right? So range of capabilities, range of use cases. Yeah, we're trying to see what are all the places where Gen AI can be applied. And App Studio is one particular area, but there's others that we're seeing.
That's great. Thank you, Sriram. So, folks, bear with me. We're going to do a very quick commercial for Analysis.tech. Lowdown on Low Code is brought to you by Analysis.tech. And if you'd like to engage with Ryan, myself, or any of the other partners in Analysis.tech, that's where to visit us at Analysis Tech. Thanks for bearing with us. And back to you, Ryan.
Fantastic. So, right, obviously as the product guy, I'm always interested in the capabilities, the features, functions. I am love to pick up on something you just talked about there, though, before. So my time in low code, I've always been trying to figure out this concept of how you help someone build a quality application, right? And as an ex-software developer, you go to the very basics of, well, there's a UI tier, and there's a business logic tier, and there's a data tier, and there's a set of supporting APIs. And the reality is the average low coder kind of starts to gloss over with that one. So super fascinated in this concept you just brought up around leveraging the AIs and potentially different agents, for want of a better description, in the background to figure out those certain components of it. Can you talk a little bit about just how does that come together? So you mentioned maybe 5 screens or 3 screens, or this should have a chart or a report. How have you gone about working through that, and where design might play into that as well?
I could say it's a lot of trial and error, but this is why I said each of those pieces, we actually have different AI, agents for each of them, right? So for example, the agent that lays things out on a screen is different from the one that recommends your data model. And the reason is we had, you build out a set of screens, you can there's some judgment in terms of how much you put on a screen. Do you put 20 things on a screen? Does the screen become too big? Are you squishing everything into one screen, or are you creating too many screens? So there's an element of, the agent suggesting something and then us applying, say, some additional heuristics on top of it. A second agent comes along and says, I've got a bunch of best practices. Like don't have 20 things on one screen and just one thing on the second screen. That's not, make sense, right? So kind of applies another set of heuristics or a second pass to kind of say, well, does this need further refinement or adjustment? So you can have multiple agents that each come in, make a particular adjustment to the initial plan. So you have the first agent that converted the requirements of the screens, another that says, well, do these screens gel well together? Another that says, do all of these connect to each other well? So you kind of have multiple of those. And I said trial and error because you kind of have to go through multiple iterations with multiple customers to get to a point where you feel comfortable that what you have is going to work. It's about taste ultimately, right? Like it's the end set of screen layouts. It's no one person, not everybody is going to agree that this is the best, right? But do they all pass some basic set of tests where none of them look bad, where they all roughly make sense, where they're all connected to each other? And so kind of the judgment call of how much we iterate on those and get to a point where we feel that for a broad set of use cases, they seem to perform well. And this is an area, obviously, we got to keep investing in. New models come out. New use cases will be thrown at it that we hadn't considered and that our tool doesn't perform well, and we'll iterate and improve. So there's an element of iteration on this.
Because it's great to see you investing in that area, because I think one of the things in the industry is for the longest time, it's just been a focus on, can I help this different class of person get an app built, and not necessarily get a quality app built or good app built that'll be adopted by the end user. So it's great to see that. So maybe I've shifted up a bit now, Rob. I think, explore some of the go-to-market side of this, right? In terms of, I think, Amazon's history and appealing to the professional developer and how all that changes.
Yeah, I mean, it is different, and I guess Shriram, the question that we always kind of tune in on this question in particular because we've had a lot of different approaches. We've had a lot of vendors on low down on low code. We've had folks who really kind of center around orchestration, or they center around process oriented applications and workflow or case management, or they really want the business developer, or they really want to build really, really complicated, sophisticated applications that are customer facing more quickly. Everybody kind of has that sweet spot in the market they're looking for. So what is that opportunity that, that you're presented with and you look at and say, well, this is actually really what we're actually going for. This is actually the exact characteristics of the client that's going to be best served by App Studio. You did kind of mention you do kind of want more dedicated technical developers, but beyond that, what are you looking?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because it's a broad spectrum of needs, broad spectrum of users. I think the people who will find App Studio most relevant are folks who have data on AWS, right? Who are, there are a bunch of people who've chosen AWS because the capabilities it offers, the cloud that is built from the ground up with security as a core, kind of a core primitive all throughout, who are looking for like kind of the scalability that comes with it. So I think if you have data on AWS, you like our security policies, you like our governance posture, you like the scalability and serverless infrastructure that, AWS offers at its primitives, then App Studio is kind of a good fit for you because we really just build on that. The app that we build ultimately just uses all of those same technologies in very much the same way a developer would have, right? And so if you like that, I think App Studio is a good fit for you.
That's great. Thank you, Shriram. Do you want to follow up with the obvious next question, Ryan?
Well, I think it's actually super fascinating because the question I have in mind is obviously pricing and licensing, and so this speaks to that a little bit, right? That an AWS customer has a way they buy from you, It's a consumption-based way. And one thing that I was really fascinated by, always as a product guy, fascinated by business model disruption, pricing and licensing, tweaking and tuning. It's been over a decade of my life devoted to it. And you've come out with something quite different here compared to what everyone else in the industry is up to. A lot of people still stuck on a
Different from
per
what
seat
everyone
model.
else is doing, but in some ways just like the rest of it. Majority of AWS, right? Certainly, we considered both models, right? We does it make sense to be different? Should we just be doing what everyone else is doing? We considered that, but it really came down, for me at least, it came down to use cases, right? Apps that people want to build, the apps that aren't being built today, they span a wide range. You've got the apps that are being used every day to the apps that's being used every week or bi-weekly, maybe a goal tracking app. It's used by everyone, but not all the time. Yep. You're using it once a month, maybe, right? And then you have, somebody told us about a lost luggage app. They never actually, that they would have wanted to build. Now, the ideal usage for that app is like 0 hours, right? But you want that app to exist so that when it is needed, you can have 1,000 people using it, right? Now, that app would not make sense to be built with some of the more traditional pricing models. And I think if we want low code, if we want our users to really use this technology wherever they need it, I think the pricing model we have is right.
So we're looking forward to seeing
matches
how
the value that
yeah.
customers derive. I think
that's I think the big thing, right? It's always pricing and licensing is always the search for the alignment with value, and I think I remember the first time I went down this path, moving low code into a subscription economy, and the first customer had 110,000 seats, and it was something that was used fairly infrequently because it was around performance management, and of course the account reps like $2 a user a month. This is the biggest deal ever. You can't do that. It doesn't work. And so, okay, now we have to offer 2 models. And then that led down the path of people trying to game. Well, should I buy seats here? Should I buy processes there?
Yeah. Gets very complicated very quickly.
Yeah. Finding that sweet spot. And that's what I loved about it. When I saw what you were announcing, it makes perfect sense to me. So it's great to see someone trying that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it aligns with how AWS customers see the world. So maybe let's drill in a little bit more about those AWS customers, because they are, not necessarily exactly who you're looking to go after here in this new world, but maybe they are. So there's some recent research that Ryan and I have released on analysis.tech. It's around whether or not we even need low code anymore, and whether or not, we're just gonna, we have things like Q developer, right? So we're just gonna tell the system what we want, and it's gonna build the app. And why do I need this intermediary function around low code? So it's a really leading question, because I think how Ryan and I feel about this topic. But Sriram, is AI driven traditional code just gonna kill low code?
The thing you've just built. That's right.
Yeah. And I half answered the question a while ago, right?
Yeah,
when I talked about the different products we have. I think, I didn't come up with this, but I think it's an enabling technology, right? It enables the people who are the experts to do more, and then it also enables a whole bunch of new people to do a bunch of things. So it's it's both it kind of broadens capabilities in 2 dimensions, right? And so what that means is, yes, Q developer will help a developer suddenly produce much more code, or maybe, a front-end developer now doesn't have to know as much about the back-end, because, they can get their answers to how to build or how to connect to a DynamoDB table much more easily, so they can be more productive. But they are always going to want access to the code to kind of fine-tune the UX, to use the latest version of a new front-end framework to kind of optimize how they do client-side or server-side rendering or whatever hybrid thing they do. They're going to want to do that level of kind of tuning for, a mass application. But somebody else, like the technical professional we're talking about, they're not on a month with code, right? That hasn't changed, right? Their needs haven't changed. Their desire to muck with code, their desire to get involved with how to scale their apps, they have no desire to do that. They want to build an app quickly. They want to know that it runs. They want to know that it's safe and secure. But that, an App Studio solves that. So that's, I think it just, AI adds capabilities for new sets of users. It doesn't subtract from what they want to do. Is how I would think about it.
That's great, and it does align with Ryan in my research, which is also
surprising.
Good to hear.
Very surprising.
Surprising. And so, with that in mind, Ryan, could you lob another softball for Sriram?
Well, I don't know if it's a softball, right? But so one of the other criticisms that often low-code faces is it's for toy applications. It doesn't scale. It can't handle enterprise grade. Now, I have loads of evidence to the contrary on this one, but I come from the vendor side, right? So you're always, oh yeah, sure, you'd say that.
Yeah.
But you've talked a lot about AWS, and AWS does scale bigger than anybody else.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned before, it's sort of that business professional just wants to know where it runs. So without giving away architectural secrets here potentially, and how App Studio is built, but what's Amazon bringing to the table here that says, no, you can build true enterprise scale things on this and we'll handle it? Because oftentimes when you're building low-code platforms, or from an engineering perspective, you do have to make some trade-offs to deliver the simplicity. Maybe it's harder to scale in various dimensions. So how have you approached that on this journey of bringing a new product to market?
Yeah, I mean, we're not giving away much by saying that, if you use our managed store option, obviously you can bring your own databases if you have them, but if you use our managed store option, we put that data in a DynamoDB that is in your customer account. So we manage the schema and all of that for you. So that's, again, this DynamoDB that's as scalable as DynamoDB is. We put all of the logic that you encode to build your app. We put all of that in the Lambda. So ultimately, we're as scalable as DynamoDB and Lambda are. We use CloudFront. We use a bunch of very, very standard, well-tested, battle-hardened AWS technologies, right? And those things they just scale. I think, there is going to be work over time to help people scale even more. But I'll give you an example. We had one customer, actually one of our earliest customers, who built an app. It was exciting. We were so happy with what they built. So we went off 2 months later. We found that they had built an app they'd extended the same app. They have 600 UX elements connecting to 30 databases. It was amazing. It was scary, shocking, amazing, all at once. And yes, when you get to that level, if you put all 600 things on, say, 2 pages, it's not going to be as performant. And so there's certainly going to be still some evolution there, but I'd say the fundamental building blocks, the technology itself can scale the way you would expect an AWS service to scale. And then there's still a little bit of how you use those. And so I think we'll keep learning from those customers, keep building that into App Studio, where it'll ultimately help you kind of structure your pages better. Say, well, don't put 600 things on one page. Don't put 300 things on one page, right?
Yeah.
So those are all learnings. But I'd say the underlying building blocks, which are AWS standard building blocks, that they are as rock solid as you can imagine them to be. And so that on that foundation you build up.
Yeah. I think it's a fascinating one for me. I always remember the time I had a customer call me up back in Intex and say, your workflow design canvas is performing terribly. We need to talk about this.
Okay.
It's a fair call. Let's jump on and have a look. 3,500 activities in the workflow. I have to tell you, we did not build it for this. Now, shame on me. We should make it easier for you to fragment this into sub-processes.
Yeah. But they got that far. They found so much value in your product that they went to that point, right?
They took it to that crazy level.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, you're obviously talking about a really interesting use case behind this. Rob, maybe explore some of that side of this platform.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually what I think is one of the fascinating topics around low code that we don't actually explore maybe as often as we should, which is you're unleashing new classes of developers. Now you're still in preview mode. You mentioned, at the launch, you mentioned Deloitte, you mentioned Launch Darkly. So you've got some some pretty cool stories, but what else can you share with us out there that's going on that maybe do a little bit in terms of how people are pushing the boundaries of innovation? What are people doing that's maybe cool and maybe even a little unexpected?
Yeah. So a couple of stories. I think one, I'd like to share the story of Health Verity. They're obviously a company that helps other healthcare providers manage software. And they previously looked at a bunch of low-code tools. They didn't actually use any of them because they didn't meet kind of the base security requirements that they had, security, data access policies, all of that. With AWS, they were able to just, they looked at the architecture, they felt comfortable that this was going to meet their requirements. And so they've built their internal tools on this. So what that's done is freed their developers to go focus on their external products. And these teams are now adding more and more. Like they build one. This is another case where, we find this pattern again with tons of customers. They build one or two things the first month, we go away. 2 months later, they've got plans for 5 more, right? And this is going back to the other story I said about somebody who started adding 600 components and a giant app. They're actually using it, like with some restructuring, they're actually using it. I think so. Constantly, the thing that we get surprised about is the scale of what people build, either in complexity or, amount of data that they are consuming. They try a little bit, it works. Okay, I'll keep going, because I'd like to think that there's such an unmet need. Like, we're always worrying about these toys, but that tells me that there is such an unmet need that once people find something that works, they're just like doubling down on it, right? That's been the surprising thing. The other thing that's, surprised for me is we thought people would connect to data in AWS. That is still true. People connect to data in AWS. But we've also seen people, they've got text tract APIs, they've got, other ML services that they've built on top of AWS, and they want to make that easier to consume. People have started doing a whole bunch of things that we'd assumed it would be more data centric than it was. We're finding a lot of other use cases as well, right? So that's, again, going back for me, like the unmet demand. Once people find something that works, they're not just going to apply it for the thing that you thought you were best designed for. They're applying it to anything that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just kind of follow up and just say, look, on the topic of unmet demand, I mean, a number of years ago, it's still fairly fresh. Bureau of Labor Statistic data saying we're going to be $10 million traditional developers short in the next 10 years, right? We can't meet the demand the old-fashioned way. So that's sort of vector number one on unmet demand. And vector number two is you put a tool into the hands of people and enable a new class of developers. You open up massive new opportunities that you didn't know existed, or you didn't think were going to be part of what you could get to, in the more traditional model that we had before.
Absolutely. I think the thing that's in front of us that's actually hard is probably to get the word out, right? Because educating
maybe
people...
Maybe a podcast
would help, yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah. Well, interesting, just sort of unpacking the use case piece a little more. One thing that we're seeing at the moment, it'd be great to get your perspective on this, because as a tech titan, you tend to find that organizations like AWS align to particular industry verticals and drive their book of business that way. We're seeing a lot of low-code vendors start to line up behind potentially more industry-based go-to-market and solution discussions and the likes. When you think about use cases you can open up and you think about getting out there and educating the market, is the vertical-based approach or a functional-based approach something you're considering? And the sort of classic providing templatized-based solutions, or just gearing up some of the generative approach to be more specific to particular verticals?
It's a good question. We've asked ourselves that. I think in a non-Gen AI world, you would definitely have considered that with templates and all of that. At this point, adding a new template for us is basically adding a prompt and doing some testing behind it, just to make sure that it works, that it generates the kind of app that you see. I don't think we're at the point yet to make any of those kinds of decisions. Like I said, we're seeing just a wide range of people using it. Data, invoice processing, inspection, obviously the healthcare example I laid out. So just we're seeing such a wide range that there isn't enough signal yet for me to say that we should focus on any verticals, right?
Right.
So I think we'll see. We'll see. It's still kind of early days of that.
So that leads to, obviously the signals and a little bit of probing here for where everything goes in the future. As a product person myself, my usual answer is no comment. And then as the person hosting the podcast, I always have to poke around and ask the questions, but without giving away, actually in this day and age, it's not really giving away the secrets, but it's more people having expectations around what might be coming. But so without lining yourself up for expectations from the audience around what might be delivered, can you share a little bit of what is on the horizon based on your learnings to date?
Yeah.
In terms of enhancements or direction, and when we might expect to see the platform? Like, what are the things that would tell you it's time to come out of preview, from an AWS perspective?
Okay, bunch of questions there. Kind of a roadmap question and then a preview to GA question there, right? Roadmap, again, can't share specifics, so there's your answer. But I'll tell you where we're getting feedback from customers, right? Like one, they love the Gen AI, this onboarding flow. Now, we can do more, right? With the onboarding flow, we can support a wider set of use cases. We can do more in terms of once you've built the app, and then if you decide you want to add another screen, there's a lot more we can do in terms of that experience. So that's an area where you could see us investing more in further leveraging the power of Gen AI to help you build more. The other place that was sort of a surprise was, published the app, you've got a test environment and a production environment. And for us, it was just a feature we needed to build. We built it. But I think somebody paused me in one of these customer discussions and said, "You mean to tell me you have a full deployment DevOps pipeline in there?" I said, "Yeah, okay, if you say it that way, yes, that's what we have." And they were just blown away. And I've seen that with quite a few customers, that the ease of going from building to it running is really amazing. And then obviously they want more. Like they want, can I help in testing? Can you help me with that? Can I do monitoring? There's a lot more, obviously. Building an app is one thing. Deploying it in a safe way, change management. We support versioning, but there's always more that you can do in that space. Change management, monitoring, all of that is a bunch of feedback that we've gotten. That's kind of been a surprise area that people loved it so much and wanted so much more. So that's another area that you might see us do more in.
Yeah. So in terms of preview to GA,
look, this is
I could have let you dodge that one.
Yeah. I was trying to. I don't think I have a date. We're obviously we want to get there as soon as possible with Q apps. So we went preview 4:30 and we GA at 6:30. That was a very short run. But this one's a bigger product. We have more work to do. So I think we'll get there as fast as we get there.
Fair answer. So one really interesting thing, actually, could go down a whole nother podcast episode on this, but the piece you just brought up is fascinating. I think something super interesting for the audience is that I've been preaching for the longest time that the job we've solved to date in the industry is to help people get the apps built. And I don't think, and I hold myself accountable for this, 15 plus years at it, I don't think we've done a great job of helping people think through the entire life cycle, right? So we've said, hey, we've taken away the need for code and developers, but we've ignored everything else that's good practice in terms of getting apps built by coders and developers, right? So this idea, and when I saw the launch, I was super interested at how fast you zeroed in on that concept of, hey, we've got dev, we've got test, we've got production, and you do different things in different places. And so it's awesome to hear that the customers you're working with are really kind of glomming onto that as an important concept. So good to see that.
I agree with you. The building is very exciting and innovating. Running something isn't as sexy, but it's just as important, right? And that's where I think the AWS Foundation really helps, right? You've got a standard set of tools. You've got, like I said, very scalable foundation elements. You've got CloudTrail for monitoring, a bunch of elements that we have that'll help us build even better.
Awesome. So Rob, maybe over you to close things out.
Yeah, Sriram, this has been great. I want to maybe throw out one more two-part question. So
Okay.
this is gonna be a good one. This isn't gonna be like, what's your product release? For a product guy to ask another product guy that question, it's just kind of not cool. But anyway, listen, there's obviously a lot of interest in what's going on with App Studio. The cool thing about low code is you get your hands on it and you can learn more about it. So two things. Anything else you want to share with us about App Studio, let us know. And then let our audience know what they can do to get up to speed on App Studio here in the near future.
Yeah. Good question. So I think if you have data on AWS, you'll love AWS's security posture. You'll love that it's a cloud that's built from the ground up with security in mind. And you want a quick way to build, right? Try out App Studio. App Studio, you just search for AWS App Studio on the AWS homepage, and you get to the landing page. And once you're past the initial onboarding and setup, you should really try out the onboarding flow. It is a matter of at most a minute or two to get an app that is actually working, right? And I think that is something that everybody should try out. And then once you do that, remember that you see that it looks good, but remember that it's behind the scenes what you don't see. It's built on all the standard AWS technologies, right? That you know and love, that are truly scalable. And that's the thing that you don't see, but that's something for people to keep in mind.
Perfect. Great way to close out. So listen, folks who are out there listening to Lowdown on Low Code, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button, comment on what you're hearing. Let us help get the word out to like-minded folks who are interested in low code. Visit analysis.tech. Sriram, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having
us.
me. This has been so much fun.
Oh, it's great. And
much.
Ryan, as always, thank you. Folks, we'll see you again next week.
See ya.